Clark. Clark takes her first shot, and it's a three. Substitution pattern. Danilo, what does that say about the depth of flow? Kicks it out to Caitlin Clark. Clark puts it up. She's got 8 points. She wanted to pull up for 3, but gonna share it with Ryan Howard, who puts it over to Clark. Clark behind the back crossover finds Ryan Howard. Howard for 3.
And that's an easy shot for her, deep 3.
The deep 3 is like a layup for her, though.
Yeah, it's a layup.
Caitlin Clark just exposed Team USA's biggest mistake. They tried to limit her, slow her down, and make her fit their system. But the second she got real freedom, everything changed. The offense looked better, the spacing opened up, and suddenly the people who doubted her got very quiet. Because this was never just about whether Caitlin Clark belonged on Team USA. It was about whether Team USA was brave enough to let Caitlin Clark be Caitlin Clark.
So many lineups. There were so many different lineups that Team USA ran during these games. And also, you guys, Kara Lawson is the head coach of this Team USA team. However, she was only there for 2 games and then she went back to Duke. And it seems like Nate Tibbetts filled in for her for the last 3 games. I was honestly wondering if the lineups would have looked different. Like, I almost would have loved to see if every assistant coach ran different games. Like, if one game Nate Tibbetts ran the game, if one game Stephanie White ran the game, and one game Natalie Nakase ran the game. Because I personally love the way that Natalie Nakase coached the Golden State Valkyries last year.
And by the end of this tournament, the answer looked obvious. For most of this run, the tension was easy to see. Every time Clark checked into the game, the energy changed. The pace picked up. The floor opened up. Defenders started panicking earlier. And yet somehow, there was still this strange hesitation around fully trusting her. That is what made the whole thing so frustrating. It was not that Clark was struggling and needed time. It was that she kept showing signs that she was one of the most important players on the floor.
I'll be honest with you. I had no idea that Caitlin Clark was playing yesterday until I got on Twitter. Team USA was playing in the qualifying round of the World Cup, and for the first time in months, my Twitter feed was filled with people talking about women's basketball. And when I say people, I'm not talking about the wanker spankers in the mainstream media. I'm not talking about the paid propagandists who try to convince us that Unrivaled is surging in popularity instead of just telling us the truth, which is Unrivaled is the turd amongst turds. I'm talking about real people, fans of Caitlin Clark, talking about her dominating performance against a country called Senegal.
But Team USA still looked like they were trying to manage her instead of unleash her. And that is a huge difference, because great players do not just put up points. Great players change the shape of the game. That is exactly what Clark was doing. You could see it in the way defenses reacted to her before she even made a move. The second she crossed half court, defenders were already leaning forward. Help defenders were creeping higher. Passing lanes were opening behind the pressure. One player was bending the court before the possession had even fully started.
Caitlin Clark doing her best Chelsea Gray impression. What a finish. Take another look. Caitlin Clark jumps the passing lane, coast to coast. Let's see. Oh, the referee got in the way to see that. She did get hit in the head. She's making a case for herself, but...
That is not hype. That is gravity. And Team USA had it sitting right there in front of them. But instead of leaning fully into it from the start, it felt like they were trying to make everything more controlled, more careful, more balanced. On paper, maybe that sounds fine. On the court, it looked like a mistake. Because the moment Clark got the ball and was allowed to push, everything looked easier. There was one sequence after another where the difference was impossible to miss. Clark would push the ball up quickly. The defense would retreat in a panic. One extra defender would shade toward her, and suddenly a teammate would be standing there with more room than they had all game.
Caitlin Clark, no one steps up, drives, kicks it to Becker.
Angel Reese has been so good.
I think that's the first free throw she's missed this entire tournament. Ray Burrell leaks out.
To recognize the advantages that they have.
Those are the little moments that change everything. They do not always become the loudest highlight, but they break the defense apart. Then there were the half-court possessions. That might be where Clark's value stood out the most. She was not just hunting shots, she was reading the whole floor. She was making early decisions. She was moving defenders with her eyes. She was throwing passes that forced the defense to choose between giving up a clean look or letting her attack the next gap.
And we see Gustafson doing the right thing. She knows it's going to be tough to get to the basket with too many bumps.
Caitlin Clark's got the ball over to Beckers. Beckers sets up the three, and it's nothing. She's got 8 points. She wanted to pull up for three, but gonna share it with Ryan Howard, who puts up a three. And
that is why this story became bigger than one performance. Because once you saw Team USA with Clark playing freely, it was hard to go back to pretending the cautious approach made sense. And the stats only made that feeling stronger. Clark kept showing up near the top in the areas that actually matter when you are judging impact: scoring, playmaking, efficiency, plus minus. The team looked sharper when she was out there, and the numbers backed up what everyone could already feel with their eyes. But honestly, the stats were not even the main point. The main point was the contrast. When Clark was limited, the offense often looked tighter and more predictable. When Clark was trusted, the team looked dangerous. That contrast kept repeating, and every time it repeated, Team USA's earlier decisions looked worse. Because what exactly were they waiting for? More proof? More control? More time? How much more did they need to see before admitting the obvious? This team was better when Caitlin Clark was allowed to be herself. That is what silenced everyone. Not some social media debate, not a dramatic quote, not fans arguing in comment sections, proof on the floor. That is what makes this such a strong story. Caitlin Clark did not prove Team USA wrong because they handed her the keys from day one and she simply delivered. She proved them wrong while fighting through hesitation. She proved them wrong while playing in a role that did not always fit her. She proved them wrong while the team around her still looked unsure about how much freedom to give her. And that makes the whole thing even louder. Because when a player still changes the game under those conditions, imagine what happens when you stop resisting it and fully commit. That is the part Team USA has to think about now. This tournament should have ended the soft doubts, the ones that said maybe her style would not translate, the ones that said maybe the pace was too different, the ones that acted like her popularity was running ahead of her actual basketball value. That argument looks weak now, because Clark did not just survive at this level, she tilted it. She made Team USA faster, she made the spacing cleaner, she made the defense work harder, and she made the whole offense feel more modern the moment she was trusted. That is not just a nice tournament, that is a warning. A warning to coaches who still think the safest move is to tone her down. A warning to critics who kept acting like the excitement around her was mostly noise. And a warning to every opponent who thought they could treat her like just another young player trying to find her place. Caitlin Clark already found her place. The real question was whether Team USA would recognize it fast enough, because this was never about whether Clark belonged. That answer came quickly. The real issue was whether Team USA had made the game harder on themselves by not trusting her sooner. And after watching the way this played out, it is hard to say they did not. That is why this feels like a turning point. Not because Clark needed saving, not because one game suddenly created her reputation, but because this tournament made the truth too obvious to ignore. When Caitlin Clark is given trust, the whole team rises. When Caitlin Clark is allowed to play with freedom, the offense comes alive. And when that happens, all the earlier hesitation starts looking like a mistake. So no, this was not just Caitlin Clark having a good stretch. This was Caitlin Clark proving Team USA was wrong. Wrong to hesitate. Wrong to overmanage her. Wrong to act like the best version of this team did not involve putting more in her hands. And once that became clear, the noise around her got a lot quieter, because proof has a way of ending arguments. And Caitlin Clark just gave Team USA all the proof they needed.
Finally, we got what we asked for. It's about damn time. After demanding it, clamoring for it, Team USA finally puts Caitlin Clark into the starting lineup. However, everything that glitters ain't gold.
Did Caitlin Clark just silence the haters with one game? Yes or no? Let me know in the comments, because after Team USA's dominant win over New Zealand, something changed. Not just on the scoreboard, not just in the highlights, and not just in the usual social media reaction that follows every Caitlin Clark performance.
CC got me ready to go ball, y'all. You see that performance from the real point guard today? Man, I'm about to go to the gym and get a bucket. She got me ready to go get a bucket. What a game. What a game. Caitlin Clark put on an absolute display today versus New Zealand. Finally in the starting lineup. It took long enough.
The real change was in how people were forced to watch her. Before this game, there was still doubt around Caitlin Clark. There were still people questioning whether the hype had gone too far. There were still people acting like she needed to be handled carefully, protected from bigger moments, or slowly eased into this level.
Caitlin Clark leads all players through 4 games with 51 points and 25 assists. And today she had 14 points, 6 assists, and 2 steals. Leads all players through 4 games. The most points and the most assists. And the most efficient of them all as well.
Even with all the attention around her, there was still this feeling from some corners that the conversation had gotten ahead of the proof. But this game pushed back on that, because against New Zealand, Clark did not just have a nice outing in a comfortable Team USA win. She gave people another reminder that her impact is different. She made the game feel different, and by the end of it, the same people who wanted to minimize everything around her had a much harder job.
Caitlin Clark, we got to get into some of these highlights, man. I don't know what took them so long to start her, but it was about damn time, and boy, did she deliver with her first start with Team USA, man. Let's take a look at some of these clips. We got Caitlin Clark coming up the floor. This is the real point guard right here. Look at the playmaking, okay? Defender trailing, boom, look at that. Throwing that ball to the weak side. Paige Becker's right there, cash out. Those two together, oh my God, I wish they could play together for the Fever. Oh my goodness.
That is why this performance mattered. Heading into the game, the discussion around Clark had already become part of the story. That happens with her now almost every time she steps on the court. It is never just about the next opponent. It is never just about the stat line. It is always about what people think she is, what they think she is not, and what they are still waiting to see. That is what made this game bigger than it should have been on paper, because Team USA beating New Zealand is not supposed to be shocking. A powerhouse beating a weaker opponent is not the headline. The headline becomes bigger when the player under the brightest spotlight changes the way the whole game feels. And that is exactly what happened here. From the moment Clark got involved, the flow looked sharper, the pace looked more dangerous, the spacing felt more stretched. Defenders had to think about her the second she touched the ball. That is the part people still struggle to explain when they talk about Caitlin Clark. They want to reduce her impact to just scoring or just highlights. But that is too small. Her real effect starts before the shot even goes up. She changes how defenses behave. She changes where defenders stand. She changes how much room everyone else gets. And once that starts happening, the whole game opens up. That is why one of the biggest takeaways from this performance was not just whether she scored, it was how often she made the defense react. A defender has to pick her up higher. A help defender hesitates a little longer. A passing lane opens because 2 people are worried about the same player. Those are the things that do not always scream at you from a box score. But if you watch closely, they tell the real story. And that story looks familiar, because this is what Clark has done everywhere. She did it in college. She has done it in the WNBA. And now, in a Team USA setting, you could see the same pattern again. The moment she settles into a game, the geometry changes. The defense stops looking comfortable. Everyone around her starts benefiting from the attention she creates. That is why this performance felt bigger than just one result. It was another piece of proof. And the strongest part of that proof was that it unfolded in front of everyone. This was not one of those quiet games where supporters have to dig through advanced numbers and explain why it mattered. This was visible. This was the kind of performance where even casual viewers could feel the difference. You did not need a breakdown board to understand it. You could see the pressure she puts on a defense. You could see the extra fear in the coverage. You could see the way the game sped up when she was involved. That is when the conversation starts changing, because doubt survives best when things feel theoretical. It survives when people can say, maybe later. It survives when people can say, let us wait and see. It survives when they can act like the flashes are not enough. But games like this damage that kind of argument. Games like this force people to move from theory to reality. They force people to stop debating the possibility and start dealing with the evidence. And for Clark, that matters because she has spent so much time as the center of a debate that was never only about basketball. The Caitlin Clark conversation has always had layers. There is the skill, there is the production, there is the attention, there is the pressure, there is the fan reaction, there is the media reaction. There are the people who celebrate everything she does. And there are the people who seem determined to lower the temperature every time she proves something. So when she has a game like this, the reaction is never small. It hits harder because the buildup was already emotional. That is why the phrase silenced the haters actually makes sense here, even if people usually overuse it. Because this was not about one critic being embarrassed by one stat line. It was about a whole style of criticism losing some of its power. If your argument was that Clark still needed to prove she could affect games at this level, moments like this are a problem for you. If your argument was that the hype was carrying her more than the basketball, moments like this are a problem for you. If your argument was that Team USA should keep treating her like a minor piece instead of a genuine weapon, moments like this are a problem for you. That is what changed. Not that every critic disappeared, not that every debate ended forever, but the balance shifted. The next time people try to question what she brings, there is now another performance sitting there in the evidence pile. Another reminder that her impact is not imagined. Another reminder that when she is trusted, things happen. And maybe that is the biggest point of all, because this game did not just say something about Caitlin Clark. It said something about Team USA too. It raised the question that keeps hanging over all of this. How much more proof do they need before fully leaning into what she creates? That is where this story gets really interesting. The early debate around Clark often focused on whether she could handle the level. But after performances like this, that question starts to fade. The new question becomes whether the team is ready to fully trust what is right in front of them. Whether they are ready to stop thinking of her as a luxury and start thinking of her as a true engine. Whether they are ready to admit that her presence changes the shape of the game in a way that very few players can. Because once people see it, they cannot unsee it. That is what happened against New Zealand. People saw the effect. They saw how quickly the pressure builds when Clark has the ball. They saw how the defense stretches. They saw how the tempo changes. They saw the confidence. They saw the control. They saw the kind of impact that makes you stop talking about potential and start talking about necessity. And that is dangerous for doubters, because doubters want uncertainty. Clark gave them clarity. They want to keep the conversation vague. Clark made it concrete. They want to act like the belief around her is exaggerated. Clark gave people another reason to believe even more. That is why this game landed the way it did. Yes, Team USA won comfortably. Yes, the result itself matters, but the bigger story is that this was one of those games where the narrative around a player tightened. One of those games where the room for dismissal got smaller. One of those games where people had to admit, even if quietly, that the player they were doubting keeps changing what happens when she is out there. And that is why this felt like more than just another win. Before the game, there was doubt. After the game, there was proof. Before the game, people were still asking whether Caitlin Clark belonged in this conversation at the highest level. After the game, the better question felt like this: how far can she take it if Team USA gives her even more? So let me ask you again, did Caitlin Clark just silence the haters with one game, yes or no? Let me know in the comments. And if you are still watching, drop silenced in the comments.
We got Nate Tibbetts taking the podium, man. I really want to know what's the reason for Caitlin Clark being benched in this championship game. I really want to know. Let's take a listen to what Coach Nate Tibbetts had to say, man.
Did Team USA create this whole mess the second they benched Caitlin Clark? Comment yes or no, because what happened next turned a simple lineup decision into one of the biggest talking points in women's basketball. This was supposed to be about Team USA winning. Instead, it became about why one of the most dangerous players in the world kept getting treated like a role player. And the wildest part is this. The more they tried to limit Caitlin Clark, the bigger she looked by the end of the tournament.
I gotta look at y'all with the side eye right now. I gotta look at them with the straight up side eye right now as Caitlin Clark was benched in the championship game for the United States. Absolute joke. Absolute joke.
That is why this story blew up. Not just because of the benching, but because the benching made no sense once you saw what happened on the court. Clark came into this run after a long layoff and still ended up winning MVP.
Cheers. How about it? Oh, no, they mad. They big mad. They are flaming right now. Caitlin Clark, in her return to basketball, like 8 months off, all these injuries, all of this stuff, the girl shows up and wins MVP just like that.
Team USA finished 5-0, and she averaged 11.6 points and 6.4 assists per game in her first games in 8 months. Think about how insane that is. Most players after that much time away are just trying to find rhythm again. Caitlin Clark came back and looked like the most impactful player in the tournament. But instead of fully handing her the keys, the coaching decisions made this whole thing feel strange from the start. They had a generational point guard, but instead of putting the ball in her hands and letting her control the game, they used weird lineups, played her off the ball, and made it feel like they were trying to take away the exact thing that makes her special.
Caitlin Clark is the real MVP, and this wasn't based on fan voting, I don't think. This is the real deal. This is the real deal. Let's take a look at what she did. First in points, first in assists, first in true shooting percentage, first in plus minus, first in 2-point field goal percentage. Caitlin Clark doing what the GOAT does. Get this CBA signed, because this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning.
And that is where fans started to lose their minds. Because once people saw the starting lineups, this stopped feeling like normal coaching experimentation and started feeling personal. It felt like disrespect. Other players were getting trusted first, while Clark, the player drawing the most attention and changing the energy of the team, was coming off the bench or being treated like a second option.
CeCe is the GOAT. We've been telling y'all, and it is what it is. Caitlin Clark is the MVP of the 2026 FIBA Women's World Cup. How about that? We had Kara Lawson trying to bench the girl. They putting her in with all these funky, funny lineups. They keep starting Chelsea Gray every game. They got her coming up. They had Angel Reese start a damn game before. Paige Becker started before. Shit, they might have put me in a game. Pardon the language. They might have started me in a game before Caitlin Clark, okay? This was absolute insanity, but this is a beautiful sight to see, okay? Caitlin Clark got her feet wet. She got a taste of it again, okay? She got her legs under her. She got that confidence. Y'all see that long three falling, hitting nothing but nylon? Listen, Caitlin Clark is about to do it to him this year. She about to do it to him this year. You can play games and act like you don't know, but deep down, you already know what time it is.
And fans could feel it, because every time Clark stepped on the floor, the game changed. The pace changed. The spacing changed. The defense had to react differently. That is what made this so explosive. If Clark was struggling, maybe the staff could defend it. If Clark looked overwhelmed, maybe the benching angle would make sense. But that is not what happened. She thrived anyway. She won MVP anyway. And that is the kind of outcome that makes every earlier coaching decision look worse in hindsight. That is why this story kept growing, because it was not just about basketball anymore. It became a story about control, about who gets trusted, about whether some coaches and power structures still seem uncomfortable with how quickly Caitlin Clark has taken over the sport. And once fans believe a player is being held back on purpose, every coaching decision gets judged through that lens. That is when the pressure becomes massive, because in sports, you can survive a loss. You can survive one bad game. What is harder to survive is making a decision the public thinks is obviously wrong, than watching the player prove that public right. That is the real fallout here. Benching Caitlin Clark turned into the kind of decision that can define a coach. Because if you try to shrink a star like that and she still ends up as the biggest story, the question becomes brutal. What exactly were you trying to accomplish? And that is the lesson sitting underneath this whole Team USA story. Do not overmanage Caitlin Clark. Do not force her into roles that take the ball out of her hands. Do not build a system that suppresses the very thing that makes her special. Build around it. Support it. Get out of the way. Because when coaches try to correct Clark's style, it does not help the team. When they trust her, the offense changes, the energy changes, the results change. And this is why the MVP matters so much. It was not just a trophy, it was a verdict. It was Clark answering all of this with production, not with talking, not with excuses, with results. 5-0 as a team. MVP. 11.6 points, 6.4 assists, first games in 8 months. That is not hype. That is proof. So when people ask why this story exploded, that is your answer. It exploded because Team USA tried to manage Caitlin Clark like she was just another piece. But by the end of the tournament, she looked like the center of the whole thing. That is why the backlash got louder instead of fading away. That is why fans kept talking about the lineups instead of just celebrating the wins. And that is why any coach watching this should take the lesson seriously. You do not build around Caitlin Clark by shrinking Caitlin Clark. You build around her by trusting what is obvious. Because the more they tried to hold her down, the bigger she became. And that might be the most important part of this entire story. Team USA may have won the games, but Caitlin Clark won the argument. If you're still watching, comment yes if you think Team USA got this wrong from the start.